Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is August the 16th, 2024. It has been 3,854 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 176 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, 2 years and 174 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression, and 11 days since Ukraine counter-invaded Russia. Today's podcast covers the events that happened on Thursday and Friday morning. You will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There is a link in the podcast description. Once again, there are a lot of map updates today. Hello, new listeners. I record 5 days a week from the Kyiv region, and I deeply appreciate your trust and support. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south, and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission: the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. There are some changes from yesterday, but if you want to skip ahead, I won't mind. I won't even know. 1. We maintain that the elevated risk of Russia intentionally targeting civilians in Ukraine due to the ongoing Kursk Oblast counter-invasion continues. We further assess that the 22nd to the 25th of August will be a period of extreme risk due to Ukrainian Independence Day on the 24th of August. 2. Russia will restart sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure by October, continuing Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 3. At this time, we maintain that Ukrainian forces do not have enough resources to defend Donetsk and New York, and the approaches to Pokrovsk and Selidovo. 4. At this time, we maintain that Russia will achieve the operational goal of capturing Donetsk and New York in 2024, and we further assess that for Ukrainian forces, an extended battle in an urban environment is ill-advised. 5. Despite the battlefield situation, Russian losses of armor, mobility and personnel continue at an unsustainable level. 6. The Russian economy is weaker than reported. 7. Persistent delays in the delivery of promised military hardware, munitions and funding continue to prevent the Ukrainian armed forces from reaching their full combat potential. 8. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox despite the ending of Russian government nuclear threats after the Kursk Oblast counter-invasion started. 9. We maintain that the policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States, and to a small extent Germany, is a failure and has proven to be ill-conceived. 10. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear power plants. We are still doing split reports, which means that some sections, such as Theaterwide and Mobix Mobilization and Mir, are still on pause. The whole team appreciates your understanding as we work overtime to cut through the fog of war. Once again, I start with the action report summary. Yesterday, Russia carried out 144 discrete assaults, and through August the 14th, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks climbed to 129. The VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, carried out 74 airstrikes, dropping 101 bombs on civilian and military targets in Ukraine. Russian ground forces conducted approximately 4,600 fire missions using tubed and barrel artillery. Overnight, Russia launched 3 Shahed-136 one-way drones and 3 Iskander-M or North Korean-sourced KN-23 short-range ballistic missiles. The 3 Shaheds were intercepted, and at least 1 SRBM hit the Sumy Oblast. Let's go into the details of what happened on the battlefield. This would be a good time to open up the war map on a second device and find the city of Sumy, that's in the northeastern part of Ukraine. There is a link to the map in the podcast description. Ready? Here we go. Once again, the most active region is in Russia, as Ukraine's counter-invasion enters the 11th day. In the Korenevo AO, there were major developments on Friday morning. Ukrainian forces advanced through Vetrina, occupying Gavrilovka and Tolpina, reaching the Korenevo-Rylsk road at Kolychevka. According to Russian sources, the garrison in Korenevo is in a technical encirclement with both ground lines of communication, or GLOC, that's a supply line, severed. The route of withdrawal is through the forest and marshes on the bank of the same river. Earlier in the day, Ukrainian forces gained full control of the approaches to Korenevo from the reservoir at Nikipelovka and cleared the region north of Kremyanaya. Multiple Russian sources reported that a troop convoy that had been deployed to relieve Korenevo was attacked while in transit, with many casualties. We do not know the size of the Russian garrison in Korenevo or the units involved in the encirclement. The same river bridge east of Glushkova has been weight-restricted to light vehicles only due to the damage it sustained on the morning of August the 15th. The bridge is between Rylsk and Teotkina, connecting the primary Russian GLOC between the logistic hub in Rylsk to the defensive node on the 1991 state border of Ukraine and Russia. In Rylsk, Russian propagandist Roman Sapankov reported that Peterochka and Magnit markets had closed, and local residents were, quote, running around the city trying to buy food. Russian sources reported that a one-way drone hit a communications facility while engineers were attempting to fix damage from an earlier strike. Russian sources confirmed our NASAFI information for resource management systems or firms analysis I told you about yesterday. There were reports that fighting was ongoing in the areas of Apanasovka and Komarovka. Our analyst and map team have earned their weekend break. And me too, I got the script very late. In the Lgov operational direction, NATO firms continued to show combat-related fires in Kauchuk. A Russian soldier set a mobility-killed BMP-1 infantry fighting vehicle on fire in Ukrainian-controlled Nikolaevka. In southeastern Lgov, a Russian Fab 500 or Fab 1500 UMPK glide bomb experienced a technical issue and struck between an ice skating rink and a bus stop on the E38 highway, exploding. Windows were blown out and the facade of the building was damaged. Incredibly, there were no casualties. The incident occurred just hours after job listings were posted in Russia for general workers to dig trenches in the Lgov region, while promising the work was not in the combat zone. That promise aged like room temperature milk. The mayor of Lgov, Alexei Klimeshov, advised residents who have already evacuated not to return, quote, until the situation improves. The reporter from Solovyov Live had a very lucky day, from a journalistic standpoint. While the team were filming a report in northern Lgov, 2 rockets fired by HIMARS struck in the area of the Lgov-2 railroad yard, a critical Russian logistical hub. The team drove away in panic. In the Bolshoe Soldatskoe AO, we coded Bolshoe Soldatskoe and Kukuy as Russian-controlled due to the lack of intelligence to support earlier claims made by Russian sources. Yesterday, Russian sources claimed without evidence that Ukraine captured the farming village of Novosotnitsky, east of Berdin. Ukrainian forces were visually confirmed north of Martinovka and in Mikhailovka, while Russian forces were confirmed to occupy the intersection between Mikhailovka and Pushkarnaya. Ukraine has almost established complete control of the Sudzha district. Ukrainian troops were visually confirmed on the road between Dmitrukov and Makhnovka at a large bunker complex. NASA firms showed significant combat-related fires in Ulanak and the road from Barki. Ukrainian forces were visually confirmed in the village of Barki early in the day and likely took control of the village 2 to 3 days ago. Russian sources claim, without evidence, that Ukrainian troops used the railroad grade from Bondarivka and advanced up to 11 kilometers to the outskirts of Nizhnya Makhova. Yesterday I told you about combat-related fires in Ruskaya Konopelka, which is just north of the railroad grade, southeast of Bondarivka. That might have been related to the reported advance. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Colonel General Oleksandr Syrsky, created the first military commandant's office in occupied Kursk Oblast, naming Major General Eduard Moskalyov as the commandant. Feel the irony, his surname is derived from the word Moskal, a derogatory name for Russian people. General Moskalyov will be tasked with the military administrative control of the occupied Sudzha district, the re-establishment of critical civilian services, and the distribution of humanitarian aid. Moscow has not responded to Kyiv's request to set up a safe corridor for civilians who want to return to Russia. Kyiv is reportedly considering opening up a post office in Sudzha, but there are logistical, legal, safety and payment issues that need to be resolved. In the Belitsa AO, there were no significant changes to the situation. Russian claims of capturing Krupets and Spalnaya were based on a video from the 810th Guard Naval Infantry Brigade showing Ukrainian troops in the settlement, followed by random artillery shelling. This only proves that Ukrainian forces control the settlement. NASA firms showed potential combat-related fires in the villages of Kondratovka and Grafovka in the Belgorod Oblast. The villages are east and south of Ukrainian-controlled Gaptarovka. Based on the satellite intelligence, we expanded the grey area. In the Sumy Oblast of Ukraine, an M142 GMLRS, better known as HIMARS, was destroyed by Russian Iskander-M or North Korean-provided KN-23 short-range ballistic missile. A Russian drone providing I-STAR observed the M142 launch rockets, which are very likely the same ones that struck the Lgov 2 railroad yard. It followed the launcher to its stand-down location and directed the missile strike. Russia carried out 56 fire missions on the border. Russian airstrikes on Krasnopilya killed 1 civilian and wounded 3.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers and analysts is funded by readers, listeners and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
From the 6th to the 15th of August, Ukraine lost 51 pieces of heavy military equipment, including 4 tanks, 12 armored fighting vehicles, 29 infantry mobility vehicles, 1 GMLRS, and 2 Buk air defense systems. During the same period, Russia lost 27, including 6 tanks, 3 armored fighting vehicles, 1 self-propelled artillery piece, and 15 transport vehicles. Ukraine captured another 70 Russian soldiers in the last 24 hours, with an unnamed colonel stating that Ukraine had taken 2,000 prisoners of war since August the 6th. Ukrainian officials stated that the only POW swap they'll consider with Russia is an all-for-all, with a special emphasis on all Azovstal defenders. Displaced persons in Russia were complaining that many had to flee at the start of Ukraine's counter-invasion through forests and swim across rivers, some reportedly in their bedclothes. Not to diminish their suffering, but we had to do the same, plus in the winter freezing temperature. Italian journalists spoke with residents in Sudzha, asking them why they didn't evacuate. They claimed that Russian soldiers told people to go to a rallying point for evacuation and then fled the settlement without them. The Minister of Defense of Russia, economist Andrei Belousov, announced he had created a plan to defend the Kursk Oblast that he will supervise personally, as ordered by autocrat Vladimir Putin. Quote, "We plan to hear a concrete action plan prepared by the General Staff on additional measures, improving the effectiveness of the military command and control system in cooperation with other law enforcement agencies and the administration of the Belgorod region, defining responsible officials, and providing additional forces and facilities that are to be deployed to carry out basic tasks." It's taken 10 days to decide. We need a plan. Russian sources are reporting that criminal cases are being opened up against Ministry of Defense generals due to their failure to defend the Kursk region. Colonel General Alexander Lapin, who was the commander in charge during Ukraine's 2022 Kharkiv counteroffensive, was named the commander of the Leningrad military district, which includes the Kursk region, on May 16, 2024. During a press conference, the United States Department of Defense was asked why are long-range strikes by Ukraine still viewed as escalatory. Listen for yourself.
We believe the best way that they can be effective on the battlefield is by knitting those capabilities together and continuing to push forces back to regain their sovereign territory. That doesn't necessarily happen by doing long-range deep strikes within Russia. And of course, we're worried about escalation. So just because Russia hasn't responded to something doesn't mean that they can't or won't in the future. And that's something that the administration is always weighing.
Washington tried to adjust its message, stating that the US was not opposed to ATACMS being used to strike Russia, but the supply was limited, and in Washington's assessment, the missiles would be better utilized striking occupied Crimea. Russian sources reported that Ukraine made another attempt to capture the border crossing at Kalatilovka without success. Less than 3 kilometers to the south, Ukrainian forces walked freely in the western part of Vyazovaya. However, it is unclear if this was a sabotage and reconnaissance unit, DRG, or if the village is occupied. Let's not forget about my home. Here is what happened in Ukraine, starting in the Kharkiv Oblast. In the Lipsy-Vovchanskoe, fighting continued in Vovchansk and the area of Gliboke, with no change to the situation. Russian forces tried to recapture lost positions in Staritsa without success. In the Kupianskoe, Russian attacks north of Sinkivka were repulsed. Ukrainian forces were unable to defend the heights north of Peshchane, and after over a year of claims, Russian forces have likely occupied the hamlet of Tabaivka. From the new position, Russian mortars can reach the P-79 highway east of the Oskil River. Ukrainian forces were able to maintain their defense of the southern part of Berestova. In the Luhansk Oblast, Russian attacks in the direction of Stelmachivka and Andriivka were repulsed. West of Kremenna, Russian forces continued their greatest hits on repeat, conducting assaults on the eastern edge of Makiivka and in the direction of Nevske, Terny, and to make things different, they added Torske. Over the last week, Ukrainian forces were able to retake their defensive positions north of Makiivka. Now let's talk about the Donbas and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. In the Siverskoe, Russia carried out 10 attacks east and southeast of Belogorivka, in the direction of Verkhnyokamyenske from Zolotarivka, southeast of Vyimka, and south of Pereizne. There was no change in the situation. In the Kostiantynivka AO, the operational tempo was slowed, with fighting limited to the western edges of the canal district of Chasiv Yar. Ukrainian forces held their defensive positions, but the situation in the Turецк-New York AO is critical. Russian attacks in Pivnichne, between Zalizne and Torske, and in the center of New York were repulsed. From western New York and occupied Yurivka, Russian forces carried out attacks in the direction of Sukha Balka and Panteleimonyivka. Russian attempts to advance on Korenevo were unsuccessful. In southwestern Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces breached Ukrainian defense for the third day in a row, making tactically significant gains in the Pokrovsk AO. Fighting continued on the eastern edge of Vozdvizhenka, and Russian forces made another attempt to advance in the direction of Zelena Pole. From occupied Ivanivka, Russian troops advanced northeast, capturing Novotoretsk on the Kazany-Torets River. Russian commanders are avoiding areas defended by more experienced units, attacking where inexperienced troops have been rotated to the forwardmost line of friendly troops. Fighting continued in southeastern Hrodivka, where a Russian soldier made a very poor life choice. When you gotta go, you gotta go, and he had to go. A Ukrainian drone watched as he removed his helmet and gear for an outhouse break, and after he closed the door, a first-person view one-way drone destroyed the latrine. There were conflicting reports on the situation in Orlivka, with some Ukrainian sources claiming the village was not completely captured. We did not change the status or adjust the map. Russian armor briefly entered northern Mykolaiivka before retreating in the direction of Orlivka. Russian forces tried to advance in the direction of Novogrodivka and Novozhelanne without success. Russian forces continued their attacks in the direction of Ptyche and Skuchna. In our assessment, Moscow is still prioritizing its offensive in the Pokrovsk AO over defending its own territory. The question is, who breaks first? In the Kurakhove AO, Russian forces carried out 19 attacks, pushing Ukrainian troops west along the Lozova River in Krasnogorivka. Fighting continued in western Georgiivka, western Paraskoviivka, and southeastern Kostiantynivka. Near Vuhledar, fighting was reported east of the T-532 highway. Finally, in the Vremivka AO, a Russian assault in the direction of Rivnopil was repulsed. And that's what we know. Our team will do flash reports on our Patreon over the weekend for critical updates, and I'll be back on Monday. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.